The news hit like a thunderclap across Britain. Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, was out. ITV, the very network that had once called her the warm heart of daytime television, had quietly cut the cord. No farewell message. No statement of gratitude. Just a single, cold line from the broadcaster's PR office confirming that she would no longer appear on ITV programming. It was over. Just like that. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But how did it come to this? How did a woman who had clawed her way back from disgrace, a royal who had reinvented herself as a relatable author, advocate, and television personality, find herself, once again, standing in the middle of a storm she didn't start but couldn't escape? Some call it karma. Others say it's the weight of unfinished scandals, ghosts from a past she never truly buried. But for Sarah Ferguson, it's something much darker. A betrayal that came from both inside and outside the walls she thought protected her. They say the royal world is about survival. But in this world, survival has a price. And Sarah is learning just how expensive that price can be. Her story isn't just another royal drama. It's a collision of loyalty, scandal, and power. It's about a woman who believed she was safe, only to discover that safety was the illusion, and reputation, the currency that can vanish overnight. Picture the scene. A quiet morning at Royal Lodge in Windsor, where the birds sing through the fog, and Sarah Ferguson sips her tea by the window. Her phone buzzes, once, twice, before she finally picks it up. A message from her assistant flashes on the screen. "Sarah, you need to see this." At first, she thinks it's a scheduling mix-up, a harmless headline, maybe another baseless tabloid story about Prince Andrew. But when she opens the link, her stomach twists. The words are brutal, final. ITV cuts ties with Sarah Ferguson amid Epstein controversy. She reads it twice. Then a third time. The tea goes cold. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not now. Not after years of rebuilding her image. Not after the successful children's book series. Not after her recent interviews where she'd spoken about forgiveness, redemption, and moving forward. She'd been careful, or at least she thought she had. And yet, the past has a cruel way of finding its way back to the front page, especially when it's tied to a name like Jeffrey Epstein. The scandal that had consumed her ex-husband, Prince Andrew, for more than a decade was supposed to be behind her. She'd distanced herself. She'd issued statements. She tried to focus on positivity and philanthropy, but the world wasn't done with her. The whispers started again. The headlines got bolder. And soon, the networks that once praised her charm started pulling her off air, quietly, one by one. And then came ITV's final decision. Imagine what it feels like to lose everything, again. The sense of déjà vu must have been unbearable. After all, this wasn't the first time Sarah had been exiled. Decades ago, the royal family had turned their backs after tabloid photos of her with an American businessman scandalized the monarchy. She had been branded the Duchess of Disaster, mocked in papers, and reduced to punchlines. But she had survived that humiliation. She rebuilt. She laughed louder than the mockery. Until now. This time, it wasn't just a scandal. It was the collapse of everything she had built. Her television career, her partnerships, her public redemption arc, all crumbling under the weight of associations she couldn't shake off. And yet, those close to her say she isn't just heartbroken, she's terrified. Not just because of the career fallout, but because of what might still be coming. ITV's decision, according to insiders, didn't happen in isolation. It came after a series of private meetings, internal reports, and, some claim, an anonymous tip that landed on an executive's desk in the dead of night. A tip that linked Sarah Ferguson to something she thought had been buried forever. But before we get there, we need to rewind to understand why ITV invested so much in her comeback in the first place. Because not long ago, Sarah was considered a success story, a redemption tale. When ITV executives approached her to appear on lifestyle and family programs, she seemed perfect. She was candid, funny, empathetic, the opposite of the cold, distant stereotype that had haunted royal women for generations. Viewers loved her. She could talk about motherhood one minute and mischief the next. She made people feel seen. And for a while, she was ITV's golden charm. Ratings spiked whenever she appeared. Producers adored her energy. Publicists described her as the nation's forgiven Duchess. But that title didn't last. Because in the world of television, forgiveness is fragile, and one scandal is all it takes to shatter it. So when whispers began that an old financial transaction between Sarah and Jeffrey Epstein might resurface, ITV panicked. Years ago, she had admitted that Epstein had helped her pay off a small debt, a decision she later called a massive mistake. But as new evidence and names began surfacing in ongoing investigations around the Epstein network, her connection suddenly looked far more sinister than naive. And that's when things turned cold. Fast. Behind the scenes, executives held tense meetings about her future. Emails flew across departments. PR consultants were called in. One insider later said, ITV wanted to believe in Sarah's innocence. But no network wants to be tied to that kind of scandal. Not after what happened with Prince Andrew. Publicly, ITV said little. Privately, they prepared for detachment. Sarah, meanwhile, continued appearing at charity events, smiling for cameras, talking about her books and her grandchildren. But the smiles had sleepless nights. Friends say she began to notice producers canceling her appearances without explanation. Invitations that used to flood and now vanished. Something was changing, and she could feel it. Then, the axe fell. No phone call, no courtesy, just silence. And the public statement that confirmed her worst fear, she'd been dropped. You might ask, why does this matter? Isn't this just another case of celebrity backlash? Not quite. This story strikes at something deeper, the fragile alliance between media power and royal privilege. When networks like ITV turn on a royal figure, it signals not just reputational decline, but a shift in cultural mood. It means the charm has expired, and the sympathy has run out. For Sarah Ferguson, that realization is devastating. For years, she positioned herself as the survivor of royal rejection, the woman who made it through scandal with humor and humanity intact. But the British public, it seems, has lost its patience for royal redemption stories, especially when the shadows of Jeffrey Epstein still linger so close to the palace gates. The irony is sharp. Not long ago, Sarah was hailed for her openness. In a world where most royals hid behind protocol, she was refreshingly unfiltered. She admitted her mistakes, laughed at her failures, cried publicly about her struggles with self-worth. It made her human, relatable. But humanity is a double-edged sword. Because when people feel they know you, they also feel they have the right to judge you. And now, judgment is all that remains. Imagine being Sarah in that moment, reading the headlines that call you toxic, hearing whispers that your charities are cutting ties, watching TV hosts dissect your every decision with faux sympathy. It's not just the loss of work, it's the loss of belonging. The realization that the industry that once applauded your authenticity now punishes it. Worse still, she's reportedly convinced that something much larger is happening, that ITV's decision was only the beginning of a coordinated effort to erase her from public life. Some close to her claim she's received quiet warnings, that journalists are digging deeper, that more damaging stories may be on the way. And that's what keeps her up at night. Not just the headlines, but what might come next. Because as she sits in her Windsor home, watching the news cycle spiral, one question gnaws at her. Who betrayed her this time? Someone fed ITV that final story. Someone tipped them off about something she thought was buried years ago. And she's determined to find out who. But before she can act, more calls begin coming in, from her publisher, her charity partners, her event managers, each one echoing the same phrase. We regret to inform you. Her world is shrinking. Her friends are vanishing. Her silence is starting to look like guilt. And yet, deep inside, she knows she hasn't told her side. Not fully. Not the truth about the deal that went wrong, the favors she never wanted to owe, the dark network of influence that once offered her salvation and now demands her destruction. So, is Sarah Ferguson guilty of anything beyond poor judgment? Or is she another casualty of a system that elevates royals for entertainment and discards them when scandal sells more headlines? Those are the questions that haunt her tonight. Because as the cameras turn away and the lights go out at ITV studios, something else is brewing in the dark. Something that could either redeem her or ruin her for good. And soon, a new player will emerge from the shadows with information that changes everything. But before we meet that person, before we uncover what ITV found that forced their hand, we have to go back to the moment it all started, to the day the phone rang at Royal Lodge, and Sarah realized this wasn't just a career setback. It was the beginning of a nightmare. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The phone call came just after dawn. The sun hadn't even broken through the Windsor fog when Sarah Ferguson's world began to unravel. At first, it was quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists before chaos. She picked up her phone, groggy, still half dreaming, expecting a message from her daughters or her publisher. Instead, she heard her assistant's trembling voice. "Sarah, ITV pulled everything. They're cutting you completely. It's official." There was a pause, just air and disbelief. "What do you mean, pulled everything?" she asked, trying to sound calm. Her assistant swallowed. "Your appearances, your segments, the book series feature, all gone. They're not airing the interviews. They're done with you." Silence. Sarah looked at the floor, unable to process it. Only last week, she had been smiling in front of cameras, joking with producers, talking about hope and new beginnings. Now, she was being erased. She hung up, opened her laptop, and there it was, headline after headline, all echoing the same cold truth. ITV axes Sarah Ferguson amid Epstein fallout. The words blurred together. Her heart pounded. And just like that, the Duchess who had clawed her way back from ruin was back in free fall. You could almost hear the cruel laughter of history. Because if there's one thing Sarah Ferguson knows too well, it's how quickly Britain turns on its fallen royals. But let's rewind. Just a few days before that phone call, Sarah had been feeling proud, almost invincible. Her latest book had hit the shelves. She'd appeared on ITV's morning program, smiling beside the hosts, discussing children's literacy, motherhood, and resilience. Viewers flooded the network with praise. "Fergie's a joy," one tweet said. "She's real. She's relatable." She was on top of the world, or at least, she thought she was. Behind the scenes, something was already shifting. ITV's executives had been receiving internal memos. Quiet warnings that association risk was rising around Sarah Ferguson. That's the polite way of saying she might be bad for business soon. And in the cutthroat world of British media, reputation isn't just everything, it's currency. One executive reportedly asked during a late-night meeting, "Do we really want to be the network backing another royal scandal?" The room went silent. Everyone remembered what happened when ITV stood by Prince Andrew for too long. Ratings dropped, advertisers fled, and viewers revolted. Now, the Duchess's name was starting to appear in the same paragraphs as Epstein again. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Because just days earlier, American outlets had unearthed documents hinting at Epstein's broader financial web, one that allegedly included loans and payments to multiple high-profile figures. Among the old names, Sarah Ferguson's resurfaced, not for something criminal, but something embarrassing. A financial favor from Epstein years ago that she had long admitted was a terrible mistake. But in 2025, even a mistake from the past can destroy a career in minutes. So while Sarah was on live television, smiling and telling stories about kindness, ITV's legal department was combing through old contracts. PR teams drafted contingency statements. And someone, no one knows exactly who, sent an encrypted file to ITV's risk office late that night. When that file opened, the countdown to her public execution began. Meanwhile, Sarah had no idea. She went about her day as usual. Breakfast with Andrew at the lodge. Calls with her publisher about a new book. Plans for an upcoming ITV Christmas segment. She even sent thank you messages to fans who had supported her charity, Children in Crisis. Life felt stable again, finally. But that's the thing about scandal. It doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door open. By the time ITV's board reached its decision, Sarah's fate had already been sealed. One executive summarized it in 4 words: "We can't take chances." The next morning, her name vanished from the production schedule. Her upcoming interviews were replaced by TBD placeholders. Staffers were told to disassociate future projects from the Duchess. The fall from grace had begun. When Sarah read the headlines, she didn't cry immediately. She stared, frozen. Then she stood up, walked to the window, and whispered to herself, "Not again. Not again." Because she'd lived this before. The 1992 scandal, the toe-sucking photos, the royal exile, the bankruptcy, the mockery. Every humiliation had taught her to fight harder, to smile through pain, to rebuild. But this time, it felt different. This time, it wasn't the tabloids. It was the industry that had embraced her, the network that called her a national treasure. Gone in a single morning. And as much as she tried to tell herself it was temporary, deep down, she knew ITV doesn't come back once it's cut you loose. Friends say that day she barely spoke. She didn't eat. She didn't leave her home. The phone rang constantly, some calls from journalists fishing for comment, others from friends unsure what to say. By evening, she sat alone in her study surrounded by old photos, smiling with her daughters, hugging schoolchildren, standing proudly at charity galas. Those pictures told the story of a woman who never gave up. But the headlines outside told a different one, a woman who'd fallen again, maybe for the last time. What makes this fall so cruel is how quickly public perception flips. Just months earlier, the press had been celebrating Sarah's comeback. They wrote about her courage, her authenticity, her ability to laugh at herself. And now, the same outlets were recycling the words that once haunted her: embarrassment, scandal, disgrace. It's almost like the media needs her to fall to stay entertained. And that's what makes Sarah's story both tragic and fascinating. It's not just about one woman losing her job. It's about how Britain builds its royal heroes only to tear them down again. Ask yourself, why do we love redemption stories but hate the redeemed? Maybe it's because deep down, the public never forgets. No matter how many apologies are made, how many charities are supported, how many smiles are televised, the shadow of scandal lingers. And in Sarah's case, that shadow has a name: Jeffrey Epstein. Even though she wasn't accused of wrongdoing, the connection was enough. One photograph, one payment, one admission years ago, that's all it takes. In the court of public opinion, guilt by association is a life sentence. So, as ITV cut her loose, Sarah wasn't just losing airtime. She was losing narrative control. When you're on television, you can shape your story, you can defend yourself, speak directly to the audience, charm them into empathy. But once the cameras turn away, your silence becomes everyone else's canvas. And they start painting their own version of you. By the second day after ITV's announcement, tabloids were already inventing details. Ferguson in hiding. Fergie breaks down in tears. Fergie begs Andrew for help. None of it was entirely true, but truth stopped mattering long ago. Her daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, reportedly urged her to stay calm. "It'll blow over, Mom," one of them said. But Sarah knew better. She'd seen how reputations crumble one headline at a time. And worse, she suspected something was missing from the public story. ITV's abruptness didn't feel random. There had to be a trigger, something she hadn't yet seen. Later that night, she sent a text to a former ITV producer she trusted. "Tell me honestly, what happened? Why so suddenly?" Minutes passed. Then a reply came. "Sarah, it's not just about Epstein anymore. There's more." Those 3 words froze her. There's more. But what did more mean? Another leak? Another document? Or something else entirely? Something she didn't know had been recorded? The thought made her stomach tighten. The next morning, the calls started again, this time from sponsors. One by one, partnerships dissolved. Given current circumstances, they all said politely, "We must suspend our collaboration." Translation: "You're poison now." Sarah tried to stay composed. She told her team to issue a short statement. "I am deeply saddened by ITV's decision, but remain committed to my charitable and creative work." It sounded professional, diplomatic. But behind the scenes, she was spiraling. Her home became a fortress of silence. Curtains drawn. No visitors. Only a handful of confidants allowed inside. But even within her small circle, doubt began to spread. Was this really just a PR move from ITV? Or had someone close to her leaked something that forced the network's hand? Her PR manager warned her to say nothing publicly until they understood the full picture. But that didn't help the gnawing feeling inside her that something was being hidden. Because you don't end a multi-million-pound contract overnight without cause. You don't erase someone from your network without warning, unless you're scared of what might surface next. And if ITV was scared, what exactly were they afraid of? It's here where Sarah's fall begins to look less like bad luck and more like a controlled demolition. One decision triggering another. One phone call leading to the next. A domino effect carefully managed by people who understood how media optics work. And at the heart of it all, a secret she hadn't yet uncovered. Maybe it was naive trust. Maybe it was arrogance. Or maybe it was betrayal. But something, or someone, had made sure her fall would be fast, public, and irreversible. Still, Sarah wasn't ready to accept defeat. She had faced worse. She told herself she'd fight back, that she'd tell her side when the time was right. But deep down, a voice whispered, "Not this time." Because this wasn't just the tabloids. This was ITV, her last safe space, her last platform. And once television turns off the lights, the darkness feels eternal. By the third night, her assistant found her sitting in the dark, surrounded by unopened letters and a half-drunk cup of tea. "Do you think they'll ever forgive me?" Sarah asked quietly. Her assistant didn't answer. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, relentless, cold. It wasn't just weather. It was foreshadowing. Because what Sarah didn't know was that deep inside ITV's headquarters, executives were reviewing a series of internal memos labeled confidential, high risk. And at the top of one of those memos was her name, underlined twice. Within that document lay the first clue about why ITV acted so abruptly. And that clue pointed towards something much darker than simple PR panic. Something that, if true, would explain everything. The silence, the secrecy, and the fear that had suddenly gripped everyone around her. But Sarah wouldn't discover that until later. Until an anonymous envelope arrived at her gate, postmarked from London, stamped private. And inside that envelope was a single USB drive. The footage, the one nobody was supposed to see. But what was on that footage, and who sent it, would soon change everything. And no one, not even Sarah Ferguson herself, was ready for what it revealed. The envelope sat untouched on Sarah Ferguson's mahogany desk for almost an hour before she dared to open it. It looked ordinary, plain brown, no return address, just her name typed in small black letters. Yet something about it felt heavy, as if whatever it contained could tilt her world again. Her fingers trembled when she peeled back the flap. Inside was a single USB drive and a folded note. The note had no signature, no greeting. Only 5 words written in careful block letters. "You deserve to know why." For a moment, she couldn't move. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked at the drive like it was alive, as if it could whisper back all the secrets ITV wasn't telling her. What could possibly be on it? Emails? Leaked footage? Something linking her to that nightmare name she had spent years trying to outrun, Jeffrey Epstein? She didn't want to believe it, but she also couldn't ignore it. So, she slid the drive into her laptop. The screen flickered. A single file appeared, Epstein_connections.mp4. Her hands froze above the keyboard. That name, Epstein, had haunted her for years. Every time she thought she'd escaped its shadow, it slithered back into her life like smoke under a door. And now, here it was again, wrapped in mystery, delivered straight to her doorstep. When she finally clicked play, the screen filled with static before revealing a montage. News clips, interviews, screenshots of financial transactions, snippets of private correspondence. Some of the images she recognized. Others made her skin crawl. The narration, distorted through a low voice modulator, said only this: "Follow the money, and you'll find the truth." Then came the email, one she had seen before. Her own name appeared next to a wire transfer from Epstein's account. The one she had once publicly acknowledged years ago. The amount, £15,000. The memo line, personal debt settlement. She had explained this before. Back in 2011, when it first surfaced, she'd said it was a desperate time. She'd been drowning in debt, humiliated, and Epstein, through mutual acquaintances, had offered to help. She'd accepted the payment, regretted it instantly, and returned it. She'd called it a huge mistake and a lapse in judgment. But the file on her screen didn't stop there. It showed new material, unverified, but devastating nonetheless. A series of blurred photos, time-stamped emails, and a ledger entry from a private fund in the Caribbean. Her name was there again, this time next to an offshore account labeled consultancy payment. She froze. The footage paused on her face. Could this be real? Or was someone fabricating evidence to finish her off? Either way, ITV had clearly seen it, or something like it. And if this file was in her hands now, it meant someone inside wanted her to know the real reason she'd been cut loose. But why anonymously? Why now? As she stared at the screen, her phone buzzed with a message from a journalist she hadn't heard from in years. "Sarah, urgent." We've heard ITV has possession of new material involving you and Epstein's foundation. Comment. Her stomach turned. The journalist's timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Someone was moving the pieces. Let's pause here, because to understand the magnitude of what was happening, you need to remember just how deep the Epstein web runs through British high society. For over a decade, his name has been a stain that refuses to fade, a ghost that drifts through palaces, boardrooms, and media networks. Prince Andrew's disastrous 2019 interview with the BBC's Emily Maitlis had already scorched the royal family's reputation. The infamous line, "I don't sweat," became a national punchline. But behind the laughter was a lingering question. Who else knew Epstein, and how far did his influence reach? Sarah Ferguson had spent years insisting that she had nothing to hide. She was open about her mistake, that brief financial transaction, the apology, the repayment. But guilt by proximity is powerful, and the media loves patterns. If one royal connection existed, surely others must too. That's how stories spread, not through proof, but through possibility. Now, in the wake of ITV's decision, the timing felt deliberate. Someone wanted to remind the world that Sarah's past wasn't clean enough for television. But who? As whispers spread through London's media circles, one name kept surfacing. A former associate of Epstein's who had quietly resurfaced in Europe, supposedly working on a tell-all documentary. Rumor had it this producer had pitched the series to ITV months ago, only to be rejected. Some believe he retaliated by leaking his research to ITV's risk department, pointing to sensitive financial data about Sarah Ferguson. If that's true, ITV's panic makes sense. The network couldn't afford another royal-linked scandal after enduring backlash over its coverage of Prince Andrew. The executives had likely decided it was safer to erase Sarah entirely than to stand beside her if the allegations resurfaced. Meanwhile, Sarah was left in the dark, blindsided, humiliated, terrified. She didn't know who to trust. Not the media, not her advisors, maybe not even the people in her own circle. So, she did what she always did in crisis. She tried to get ahead of the story. She called her lawyer, demanded to know whether ITV had received any official complaints or warnings. The answer she got was maddeningly vague. We're hearing whispers of potential reputational risk documentation. They're claiming legal privilege, so they won't release anything. Legal privilege. Two words that mean, we're covering ourselves, not you. She slammed the phone down. You could almost feel her fury rising through the walls of Royal Lodge, a mixture of fear and defiance. She'd been the monarchy's scapegoat before. She wouldn't play that role again. But what she didn't realize was that outside her gates, the story was already mutating. Tabloids ran headlines linking her to Epstein's secret UK network. Talk shows speculated about her finances. Anonymous social media accounts claimed they had proof she'd attended private parties hosted by associates of Epstein's foundation. None of it verified, all of it viral. By nightfall, her reputation was bleeding out online. And while the world gossiped, Sarah began to piece together a horrifying thought. What if this wasn't just about Epstein's past? What if someone close to her was feeding that past to the present, drip by drip? There was one clue, a name on the digital file's metadata. M. Ryder. That name hit her like a slap. Marcus Ryder, a former PR consultant who had worked with her team briefly 2 years ago before leaving under tense circumstances. He'd handled media relations for several major networks, including, briefly, ITV. If anyone knew where to strike to destroy her reputation, it was him. Could he be the one who leaked the material? Or was someone using his name to frame him? The questions twisted like knives. She decided to confront him. 2 days later, she arranged a call through a mutual contact. When he finally picked up, his tone was oddly calm. "Sarah," he said, almost kindly, "you shouldn't have opened that file." Her breath caught. "What file? You mean the USB? What do you know about it?" He hesitated, then sighed. "Let's just say some people wanted to make sure you wouldn't drag ITV down with you. You were becoming inconvenient." "Inconvenient," she repeated, her voice trembling. "They couldn't risk another royal implosion," he said. "They thought cutting you off was mercy." "Mercy," she snapped. "They destroyed me." He didn't answer. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "You were warned years ago, Sarah. You just didn't want to listen." The line went dead. That sentence haunted her for days. You were warned years ago. What warning? By whom? She searched her old emails, her old notes. even her journals. And then she found it, an email from 2015 sent by a private investigator she had once consulted during her financial troubles. The subject line read, "Do not accept financial assistance from individuals tied to Epstein Foundation." She had ignored it back then. She thought it was paranoia. Now, a decade later, it felt prophetic. The realization shook her to the core. She hadn't just made a bad decision years ago. She had walked straight into a trap that would wait patiently for its moment to destroy her. And if Marcus Ryder was right, that moment had arrived. But the bigger question lingered. Who else knew? Because to bury someone like Sarah Ferguson, it takes more than one person. It takes coordination, silence from those who benefit, leaks from those who don't, and timing precise enough to feel coincidental but not accidental. And that's exactly what was happening. Somewhere in London, ITV executives were exchanging private emails labeled Re. Ferguson materials. One message read simply, "Proceed quietly. No statements beyond confirmation. No statements. No defense. Just quiet erasure." Meanwhile, the USB drive, the one she'd hidden away, contained another layer. She hadn't noticed it at first, but tucked inside a secondary folder was a document titled Meeting Notes, January 2024. She opened it. The notes described a confidential meeting between ITV's head of programming and a US-based documentary producer investigating royal connections to Epstein's estate. The producer had reportedly expressed intent to include Ferguson in an upcoming exposé unless ITV took proactive distancing measures. In other words, ITV hadn't axed her because they discovered something new. They'd axed her to protect themselves from what might come next. The betrayal wasn't just about loyalty. It was about survival. And yet, for Sarah, the humiliation was the same. She had been preemptively sacrificed, silenced not for what she'd done, but for what others feared she might remind them of. As she sat in her study that night, staring at the flickering light of her laptop, one question refused to leave her mind. How deep did this go? Because if ITV had folded so easily, who else would follow? Her charities? Her publishers? Her friends? The dominoes were already falling, and she could hear the next one tipping. Outside, the wind howled through the trees surrounding Royal Lodge, and in that eerie quiet, she could almost hear the ghost of Epstein whispering through the corridors of her life, pulling her name back into the headlines, reminding her that escape from scandal is never truly permanent. The past doesn't die. It waits. And now, it had come knocking again, with footage, with names, with secrets too dangerous to keep buried. But there was something else hidden in that file. A final clip at the end of the video, one that lasted only a few seconds. It showed a time-stamped security still from a London hotel lobby in 2010. Two figures were visible in the frame. Jeffrey Epstein, unmistakable in his suit and grin, and a red-haired woman wearing a black coat, partially turned away from the camera. The face was blurry, indistinct, but the file name under the image read, Duchess_confirmed. Sarah froze. She didn't remember that photo, didn't remember that night. But whoever leaked this knew exactly how to make it look damning. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. She knew what this meant. The media storm had only just begun, and ITV wasn't the end of her problems. It was only the first to run, because now others would follow the scent. The tabloids, the charities, the investigators, the royals themselves. And somewhere, in the shadows of London, someone was waiting for her to make the next move, because that's when they planned to strike again. But what Sarah didn't yet know was that the footage ITV feared most wasn't this file. There was another, one far more damaging, one that never reached her hands. And that secret would soon surface, inside ITV's own panic room. The same one they'd locked the night they decided to destroy her. And when it opened, everything would explode. It was almost midnight inside ITV headquarters in London when the doors to the 11th floor conference suite sealed shut. The walls were soundproof, the curtains drawn, the lighting dim. Only a handful of people were allowed in that room. The network's legal chief, the head of programming, two senior producers, and a crisis consultant flown in from New York. They called it the bunker, but among staff, it had another name, the panic room. No phones, no recordings, no leaks, just whispers and fear. On the screen in front of them glowed a paused video still. Sarah Ferguson, smiling on set during her last ITV segment. holding a children's book and laughing with the host. She looked radiant, wholesome, safe. And yet, to everyone in that room, that smile was now a liability. The legal chief leaned forward, his voice low. "We have to assume this footage will leak. It's not if, it's when." The crisis consultant, an American woman with sharp glasses and sharper instincts, nodded. "If even part of what's in those files reaches the press, you'll have your second Prince Andrew disaster within 48 hours. Sponsors will flee before sunrise." The room fell silent. Someone exhaled too loudly. For years, ITV had quietly prided itself on giving disgraced figures a second chance. It made for good television, redemption cells. But this was different. The Epstein connection wasn't just a bad look, it was radioactive. And now, someone had dropped an unverified file containing new evidence right into their inbox. That's what triggered the panic room meeting. The file, labeled Ferguson, private, had arrived through a secure channel 2 days before the public announcement of her termination. No sender, no traceable origin. Just a note attached. Urgent, before the broadcast schedule update. When they opened it, chaos erupted. Inside were clips, unseen interviews, rehearsal footage, and what appeared to be snippets of private conversations recorded on set microphones. None of it was criminal. None of it confirmed wrongdoing. But it was messy, emotional, and full of implications that could be twisted into something scandalous. In one clip, Sarah was heard joking off camera about the royals never paying their own bills. In another, she mentioned a private meeting with a financier who helped sort things out years ago. To the untrained ear, it sounded like harmless banter. But to anyone in PR, it was a bomb with a lit fuse. The head of programming rubbed his temples. Half the country adores her. The other half still remembers the 90s. This, he gestured toward the frozen image, could turn sympathy into suspicion overnight. The legal chief sighed. "We can't risk it. We're cutting ties. But we need proof she's breached something," one producer argued. "Otherwise it looks like we're abandoning her for optics." "Optics are the proof," the consultant said coldly. "You don't wait for smoke when you already smell fire." And so, the decision was made, not because Sarah had done something new, but because someone else had made it look like she had. The next morning, the press release went out. Inside the bunker, the team destroyed the original file, or at least claimed they did. But digital ghosts never really vanish. The footage lived on in fragments, backups, and shared drives no one ever completely deletes. One intern, tasked with clearing the archive, hesitated. Out of curiosity or guilt, they made a private copy before erasing the record. That copy would later become the key to everything. But for now, ITV believed the problem was contained. Meanwhile, across Windsor, Sarah Ferguson sat awake at her desk, staring at her phone. She had tried calling her contacts at ITV all day. No one answered. The same people who once begged her to appear on their shows were suddenly unreachable. Finally, a text came through from a junior producer she had mentored years earlier. It said simply, "They're in lockdown meetings." Something big scared them. "It's not just the Epstein file." Her heart sank. Not just the Epstein file. So there was something else, something she didn't even know existed. She typed back quickly. "What do you mean?" What scared them? The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then silence. Whoever that producer was, they'd just realized they'd said too much. Sarah's mind spun. If it wasn't the Epstein link, what else could ITV have on her? Then, a memory surfaced, something she had pushed to the back of her mind. Months ago, during a filming session for a charity segment, she had confided to a producer that she'd received strange offers from wealthy overseas donors who wanted to fund her book series in exchange for discreet collaborations. She'd laughed it off at the time, insisting she never accepted. But what if someone had recorded that conversation? What if it looked like something else? She needed answers. And the only way to get them was to find someone inside ITV willing to talk. Back at headquarters, the panic room wasn't calming down. The crisis consultant had begun pacing. "We need a scapegoat," she said. "Someone to take responsibility for greenlighting her appearances. If this file leaks, the narrative has to shift. We acted immediately when we learned of it." The programming head frowned. "That's a PR slaughter. We'd be admitting we knew something before acting." "Then rewrite the timeline," she shot back. "Shift the dates. You're protecting a network, not a person." They all knew what that meant. ITV would publicly claim that the network had just learned of the issue, even though they'd been sitting on those files for days. It was deceit dressed as damage control. As they drafted the internal statement, one executive muttered under his breath, "She'll never recover from this." The consultant replied coldly, "That's not our problem." 3 days later, a whistleblower inside ITV reached out to a journalist, the same one who had texted Sarah earlier. The message read, "There's footage they're hiding. Not Epstein, internal, private recordings." The journalist's eyes widened. "You mean recorded here?" "Yes," came the reply, "and not by her." Within hours, the rumor spread across London's newsroom circles. ITV had compromising internal footage tied to Sarah Ferguson. Nobody knew what was on it. Nobody had seen it. But that didn't matter. Perception was enough. The ghost story had turned into an inferno. When Sarah's lawyer finally managed to get a meeting with an ITV representative, the conversation was chillingly brief. "We regret our decision was necessary due to reputational factors," the network's legal counsel said, voice monotone. "Reputational factors?" the lawyer pressed. "Be specific." "I'm afraid I can't disclose confidential internal matters." "So you're admitting there's internal material?" The counsel paused, eyes flicking upward like a soldier choosing words. "I'm admitting nothing. But for your client's sake, I suggest she refrain from public comment." Translation: "We have something. Don't push us to use it." When her lawyer relayed that message to Sarah, she went pale. "They're blackmailing me without calling it blackmail," she whispered. "What are they so afraid I'll say?" At the same time, in the bowels of ITV's data servers, the copied footage that the intern had secretly saved began moving. The intern had shared it with a friend for safekeeping, and that friend, curious, maybe greedy, uploaded a few seconds of it to a private forum. It wasn't much, a brief behind-the-scenes moment of Sarah off camera, complaining that some people would rather bury the truth than face it. The clip was harmless, but online it became fuel. What truth? Users speculated. Was she threatening to expose the royals? ITV? Epstein? The comments multiplied by the hour. Suddenly, ITV's panic room was back in emergency mode. "Who leaked this?" demanded the programming head. "We deleted every copy." "Someone didn't," the consultant replied grimly. "And now it's out of our hands." The room buzzed with tension. They knew what came next. Once a clip leaks, more follows. That's how digital fires burn. And if anyone traced the footage back to ITV's servers, they'd have to explain why the network was hoarding private recordings without consent. The legal chief swore under his breath. This could turn from PR disaster to legal catastrophe. He turned to the consultant. "You said this file came anonymously. Are we sure it wasn't internal from the start?" She hesitated. Meaning maybe it wasn't someone warning us. Maybe it was someone inside setting us up. That silenced the room. Because if someone inside ITV had planted that file, the network wasn't the protector, it was the weapon. Meanwhile, Sarah was losing sleep. She replayed the USB footage over and over, trying to decode it. One detail nagged her. In one of the video overlays, a watermark flashed for just a millisecond. ITV Archive B. Her heart dropped. That meant the source of the footage wasn't an external leak. It came from inside ITV's own storage. So why pretend otherwise? Why hide behind Epstein headlines when the real material came from their own archives? The betrayal felt deeper now, not just abandonment, but manipulation. She scribbled a note to herself. Find out who's in ITV Archive B. Find who accessed the files. She called a former producer she trusted, a man who had quietly left the company months earlier. "Tell me about Archive B," she said bluntly. He hesitated. "Sarah, you don't want to go near that. Try me. It's not an archive. It's where they store unaired material, off-camera footage, internal tests, background rolls. They call it the panic room because nothing leaves it. It's all NDA locked. Only execs and the legal team have access." Her pulse quickened. "Then why was my footage there?" He sighed. "Because someone flagged it. Someone high up thought you might be risky. They started keeping everything you said between takes, just in case." "Just in case what?" "Just in case they ever needed leverage." Sarah went silent. Her hands shook as she realized what that meant. Every smile, every casual remark, every off-record conversation, all of it might still exist somewhere in that secret archive. And if those tapes ever surfaced, she'd be finished. She whispered, almost to herself, "They were never working with me. They were collecting me." Across London, the ITV panic room was still in damage control when an assistant burst in with a tablet. "You need to see this," she said. On screen was a trending social media clip, the same brief behind-the-scenes video that had leaked. Comments were exploding. ITV hiding royal secrets. What is Fergie's truth? Network cover-up incoming. The consultant turned white. Shut it down before it trends globally. Too late, the assistant said. It's already on Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube mirrors. The programming head slammed his fist against the table. We were supposed to bury this. The consultant looked toward the door. Then someone just dug it up. They exchanged glances, panic in every eye. For the first time, they realized the threat wasn't Sarah Ferguson. It was whoever was pulling strings inside their own walls. At Royal Lodge, Sarah scrolled through her phone, seeing the leaked clip flood social media. People were defending her now, saying ITV had silenced her to protect royal secrets. For a moment, she felt vindicated. Finally, a twist in her favor. But that feeling didn't last, because she knew what the public didn't. There were hours of footage worse than that tiny clip. Conversations she'd forgotten, moments taken out of context. If those surfaced, the sympathy would evaporate. And deep down, she feared the leaker wasn't on her side. Whoever had started this seemed to want chaos, to burn both her and ITV at once. That night, unable to sleep, she received another anonymous email. The subject line read, Phase 2. No message, just an attachment, a single image. It was a photo of ITV's panic room. The inside, complete with timestamp. Someone had been there. Someone was documenting everything. Her phone slipped from her hand. Because if that image was real, then the war hadn't even started. It had only just begun. And the next attack wouldn't be digital. It would be personal. It started with a sound. A faint electrical buzz from the laptop speakers, like a fluorescent light trying to wake up. Lady Serena Fairchild held her breath. On the screen, a gray rectangle, a spinning wheel, then a timecode flickered to life. 1 second. She pressed her palms together so she wouldn't reach out and slammed the lid shut. She had asked for the truth. The truth had arrived on a tiny drive that still felt hot in her palm. Now she had to live with it. Play, she whispered. The picture resolved into a backstage corridor at Channel 12 UK's Riverbank Studios. A red tally light glowed down the corridor. Out of frame, an audience was cheering for a daytime host whose name Serena couldn't even process. The camera angle wasn't from the show. It was from the ceiling. A security feed or a tucked-away GoPro. Unofficial. Predatory. In the frame, Serena herself appeared. On a day she remembered for all the wrong reasons. Navy dress. Silk scarf. The morning she'd finished a children's literacy spot and stayed to tape an extra segment about second chances. She remembered the way the crew laughed with her, how she'd hugged the floor manager, how the makeup artist had told her she looked lighter, freer, alive. That day had felt like air after drowning. On screen, she watched herself step into the corridor and lean against a wall with a paper cup. She remembered this minute, too. A private sigh, a tiny moment of relief. Another booking done. Another chance to be useful. Camera Serena rubbed her temple. Off frame, a male voice said, "We'll get you into Studio C in 5, Lady Serena." "Thank you," she answered. Nothing scandalous. Nothing wicked. But the lens didn't blink. It waited. The frame cut. 2 minutes and 37 seconds snapped to 16 minutes and 12 seconds. Another angle, a glass-walled green room. Serena sat with 2 producers, a woman with a tablet and a man with a lanyard. The man was new on that show. She remembered the nervous laugh, the way he kept glancing at the clock. The audio on the file was boosted. Voices were clear in a way no security feed should be. Someone had sweetened it. Someone had worked on this. "Quick thing," the man said. "Any comment on the rumors about Duke Adrian's settlement?" A blade under the table. Serena's throat tightened just watching it back. She knew exactly what she'd said that day because she'd said it 1,000 times. "No, I don't speak for my former husband. I can speak for my own choices. I have made mistakes. I'm trying to do better." "Right, of course," he said. "We're huge fans here." "We are," the woman added. On screen, Serena smiled. The file cut again. 16 minutes and 12 seconds jumped to 29 minutes and 3 seconds. The view was tighter now, zoomed in as if the editor wanted the pores in her skin. She could see the faint pulse in her neck. She knew what came next because it had been the thing she'd regretted all afternoon. Not the words, but the tone. Tired. Unguarded. The woman producer shifted the conversation. We're scheduling a panel on charity ethics in 2 weeks. You'd be perfect. How to rebuild trust after public mistakes. I'd do it in a heartbeat, Serena said. Trust is a long bridge. Some days you can only lay one plank. Lovely, the man murmured. And just to be tidy, any interactions with Jasper Ellison we should be aware of? Everyone's vetting hard now. The room on screen went still. Serena remembered this beat like a bruise. The disgraced financier's name was a ghost that rattled chains in every corridor she walked. She had publicly condemned him years ago. She had apologized for allowing a debt to be settled by someone in his constellation. She had said and said and said. Years ago, a single financial misstep, she replied calmly. I returned it. I regret it. That's my history, and I own it. Understood, the woman said. Thank you. Cut. 41 minutes and 18 seconds. Now a different day. Different blouse. A rehearsal mic was clipped to Serena's collarbone. You weren't supposed to record on rehearsal mics. Everyone knew that. The angle came from low on a side table, another hidden camera. The audio captured a private sentence she'd said to the makeup artist while they waited for a guest. Some people would rather bury the truth than face it. When you say people, the artist had teased gently. Do you mean the palace or the press? I mean power, Serena answered. Whoever holds it in the room. Rarely the same person you think. Watching herself deliver that line in high definition, Serena felt the chill of context slipping like gravel underfoot. On a show day, that line meant everything and nothing. On a timeline engineered to make her look dangerous, it sounded like a threat. She paused the file. The timecode froze at 41 minutes and 42 seconds. On screen, the green room lamp carved a thin halo along her hairline. How many hours of this existed? How many private breathings, mini laughs, swallowed flinches, polite deflections had been vacuumed up, archived, and tagged with her name? She'd spent months believing Channel 12 UK had erased her, wiped her from schedules with a single sterile email. The truth was worse. They had collected her. She pressed play again. The edit shifted from raw to curated. A bass hum entered like a heartbeat under the clip. Terms flashed in captions: misstep, pattern, risk. The footage cut to screenshots of emails, subject lines like panel, rebuilding trust and charity segment clearance, and risk note. Fairchild. Keep for review. Some were familiar. One was new. A name string in the from field tightened the skin around her ribs. M. Ryder. Marcus Ryder. She'd confronted him 2 nights earlier on a call, and he'd told her in that flat, practiced PR tone that the network couldn't risk her. But seeing his name attached to an internal risk note wasn't confirmation of guilt. It was proof of proximity. He had been in rooms where her name was underlined twice. He had once worked in comms teams that liaised with the Riverbank campus. He knew the difference between footage and leverage. He knew how long to wait before a story fell into your hand like a ripe fruit. The file ticked on. 56 minutes and 9 seconds. Serena's own voice again, this time laughing as she tucked a stray strand behind her ear. You know what's funny? She'd said to a floor manager after a shoot that had run late. Everyone wants me to be repentant and upbeat. No one asks me what I lost. What did you lose? The floor manager had asked. A room, she'd said. A room I could walk into without explaining myself. The edit cut to a fast sequence. Tabloid covers, old scandals not worth reliving, shaky telephoto shots of her at a school garden fundraiser. Every image synchronized with the low bass. It was like being repeatedly tapped on the forehead by invisible fingers. See, 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 the rhythm said. Remember who she is. Serena hit pause again. Her tea had gone cold. What was this exactly? Not a documentary rough cut, too small. Not a single video. A compilation. A kit. The kind of package you send to a board to say, here is your justification. The kind of thing a network uses when it wants to say, we had to. A priestly ritual of absolution in the Church of Optics. She scrolled the file to check the total runtime. 1 hour 17 minutes and 54 seconds. She had watched only the first hour. She stood, walked to the window, and pressed her forehead to the glass. Royal Park below was black velvet with a single fox moving the lawn like a quiet thought. Foxes picked paths that kept their hearts beating. That was what she would do now. She returned to the laptop, unpaused. New angle. 1 hour 2 minutes and 1 second. The image quality sugared, like someone had exported a screen recording of a mobile phone capturing an internal call. 4 faces and squares. The Channel 12 UK legal chief. The head of daytime programming. A northern PR director who liked to pretend he hated London. And another face Serena didn't recognize. Cheekbones like lathework, eyes like sudden weather. The name tile said V. Hart. Crisis consultant. We go early, Hart was saying over speaker. We do it clean. You inform her agent, then publish. If a rival outfit asks, you confirm disengagement and cite brand alignment. No elaboration. What about the material? The programming head asked. We didn't solicit it. Keep it archived, the legal chief said. Segment B vault. Legal defense. No external retention. And if the public asks why we're dropping a woman our viewers love, the northern PR director muttered. Hart's mouth barely moved. Public memory is a living thing. Inertia tilts to protection. You don't defend a hurricane. You get out of the path. The call ended. A blue light washed across the stranger's cheekbones. The screen went black for a beat. 1 hour 4 minutes and 28 seconds. Serena's spine straightened. She had expected cowardice. She had not expected liturgy. There were words and practices and vaults. She opened a notes app and typed. Segment B vault. V. Hart. Legal defense retention. No external retention equals internal leverage. She whispered to the room, to the lamp, to the fox. Find the intern who made the copy. Because someone had. The online leak. A few seconds of her off-mic sentence about people burying truth had not come from the outside. It had been born in the building that had swallowed her. She pressed play once more. Now the edit changed again. No longer boardroom or green room. A hotel lobby in 2010, the kind that had too much glass and never enough privacy. A timecode locked at 1942. A man in a slate suit crossing the marble, Jasper Ellison. The disgraced financier. The editor did not label him. They didn't need to. Everyone knew that face the way people know storms. In the corner of the frame, a woman with auburn hair stood near a ficus, half-turned. The resolution was deliberately mushy, like the file had been passed one time too many. The label under the still read Duchess_confirmed.png. The implication was the point. The implication was the whole architecture. Serena inhaled. The auburn hair was the only point of resemblance. The height was wrong. The posture was wrong. 1,000 times she had been mistaken for herself by people who wanted to graft her onto a headline. Always a blur. Always a maybe. She let the breath out slowly. A heat rose behind her eyes. Not shame, not fear. Rage. Not volcanic rage, glacier rage. The kind that carves canyons because it doesn't stop. The compilation ran a beat longer, as if the editor wanted her to stew. Then a new slide appeared with a title card. Meeting notes, January 2024. Bullet points ticked past. Contact with U.S. doc producer. Schedule collision with new expose series. Preemptive distancing. Donor sensitivities. Board risk appetite low. The weaponized corporate dialect of self-preservation. Why pretend it was about anything else? She closed the lid halfway. The screen's glow cut in half and lit her fingers like broken porcelain. She needed to see the end. She also needed to be very sure she didn't break anything before she did. Finish it, she said to herself, and finished it. The final segment felt different again. It wasn't archival. It wasn't boardroom. It was handheld. It jittered. A camera moved down a long corridor with carpet that muted footsteps. The sort of carpet you buy when you want secrets to have soft shoes. The lens turned into a room Serena had never seen in person. Cooled air. No windows. Racks of drives with tiny status diodes blinking the Morse code of captivity. A nameplate on the door came into focus. Segment B. The person holding the camera whispered, "They keep everything here. Just in case." Poor woman. The whisperer wore a high-visibility vest. A maintenance contractor? A courier? A mole. The frame tilted down. 2 case labels were readable. Fairchild. Off-camera raw and Fairchild. Greenroom PRIV. The fingers in the shot trembled. For a second, the lens caught the corner of a laminated lanyard with a first name and a photograph mostly occluded. Enough hair to guess at a ponytail. Not enough to identify. The feed cut. The file ended. Silence filled the study like fog. Serena spoke to the empty room. So this is the truth they were afraid of. Not the past. The present. The fact they kept the past alive. The truth had nothing to do with a 10-year-old lobby still or a payback misstep. The truth was a vault with her name on it. The truth was a system that recorded her when she was unguarded and held those pieces as insurance. The truth was a decision made in a call where her humanity had been weighed like a risk factor. And someone wanted her to know it. Someone had filmed the vault. Someone had slipped the drive under her gate with a note that said, "You deserve to know why." Who? Why now? She stood up and paced. Once across the room, twice, 3 times. The carpet held her footsteps as if the segment B carpet had reached into her home. She needed to anchor herself in facts, even in fiction's neighborhood. The facts as she had them. A compilation existed, curated to suggest pattern and risk. Internal calls had been recorded and exported, illicitly or by someone with admin access. A mole had entered the vault and filmed her labeled drives. An online clip had leaked days earlier to seed the narrative. Her former PR contact, Marcus Ryder, had proximity to the comms machinery that would understand how to shape this. The crisis consultant's name was V. Hart. The leak had an emotional logic, not just a legal one. Someone wanted both Channel 12 UK and Serena to suffer. That suggested a personal motive. Motive is a bridge. You don't get across without asking who needed to get to the other side. She opened her phone and scrolled her messages to the producer who had texted, "They're in lockdown meetings."